Good afternoon, almost everyone. We are live today. We are waiting for Reverend Wylie Hughes from the Orchard Park Presbyterian Church to join us for our discussion today. Our discussion today is going to focus on a number of things that Reverend Hughes and I have been talking about for a long time. They include things like how do we reinvigorate the conversation between American Jews and African Americans about how to work together? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, there is this very interesting article in Tablet Magazine written by a pastor on the south side of Chicago about the effectiveness or lack thereof of DEI. Very poignant article. We may be referring to that. We are also concerned about the nature of public discourse and what's going on in American society and the illiberal left, as it were, perhaps a phrasing from Adam Gopnik and his interesting book, A Thousand Small Sanities. These are all things we are working on together. We're going to start probably with the DEI conversation today. After we introduce ourselves, since we are live on Facebook, we invite people to join us via Zoom if you want to join the conversation. The link is on my Facebook page if you want to find it. If you have any questions, you can reach me there. We will try to take questions as we go and figure out. So feel free to comment, feel free to ask questions. This is going to be really a forum for us to engage in, let's call it building accompliship, this idea that we could, in fact, all come together and be better accomplices. Recently, just like this morning, I am listening to a book recommended to me by a local attorney named Adam Perry. And this book is called Winners Take All, which I very much recommend. It's called Winners Take All. The author is Anand Giridharadas, and it's called The Elite Charade of Changing the World. And his premise, which is pretty hard to argue with, is that the winners in our current system are invested in not having that system change. So when they invest in social justice or progress, they do so in a way that doesn't change the system that created the wherewithal for them to be winners. In other words, if you have a 1%er philanthropist, here is Nanette Massey. We will welcome Nanette into our conversation. If you haven't met Nanette, she is awesome. And we are still waiting on Reverend Hughes to get his video together. But Nanette and I can talk for hours once she gets in, and hopefully that will be interesting and productive as well. Hello, Nanette. And here's Pastor Hughes coming in. Oh, well, the three of us. Hi, Nanette.
Hi.
So we're just waiting for Reverend Hughes to join. He had some technical issues, so I was laying out our groundwork for discussion today, which is a lot of topics. Of course, Nanette, your contributions are not only welcome but encouraged, because I trust your wisdom on pretty much everything we're going to be talking about. And here is Reverend Hughes, or Pastor Hughes, as he identified himself as.
How did you and Pastor Hughes hook up?
What?
How did you and Pastor Hughes hook up?
Through my work at Voice Buffalo. He is at Orchard Park Presbyterian Church. He is the first African-American pastor in a very white church. And they set out deliberately to hire an African-American pastor. So he is their conscious choice.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So
because we know each other.
How do you know Wylie?
Um, his church, and another church down in Orchard Park had me come down and talk to them just before Robin D'Angelo.
Oh wow.
And Pastor, yeah, and Pastor Hughes and I are working on me coming to do my workshop maybe in the spring for his diocese, I guess it's called. Yeah, we're working on making that happen.
For his presbytery.
Presbytery, that's it.
Yes.
I'll be
So
back. I'll be right back, okay?
okay. Are you coming in with your phone, Pastor Hughes? I bet, huh? All right. So I mentioned a book that I'm reading today as a way of sort of getting our conversation going until once Pastor Hughes gets his technical stuff taken care of. And the book that I mentioned is this Winners Take All, the elite charade of changing the world. And the author puts forward a very interesting perspective on this question of whether or not it's possible to make real change led by those who have in fact benefited from the inequities of our current system. And this seems to be a very interesting challenge. Can, in fact, the winners, as it were, of our 21st century contemporary capitalist system, in fact, participate in making it more fair? And really, the interesting question involved in this, from my mind, that I'm only a little way into the book, is can we actually get people to participate in giving up some of their advantages? Often people have phrased this. I've heard the question from some people in the realm of, can we get, often people ask me sort of facetiously, white people will not participate in giving up their privileges. And so here, where this is an even sort of more basic question, can we get the winners in our economic system to participate in changing that economic system so that we have video for Pastor Hughes? Victory.
So I definitely had to get on my phone. I don't know what my computer was doing. I use this thing for Zooms 3 or 4 times a week, but today
Yeah.
it wants to do something different. So my apologies.
No
Uh-huh.
apology necessary. Technical stuff happens.
They really do happen, and they happen when you least expect it. Never trust the machine.
Well, so Pastor Hughes, I want us to introduce ourselves. So before we start taking on the machine, because of course part of our question is really how do we deal with a system that's inherently unfair and use that system to change itself? This is one of my fundamental questions that I was raising before you got on. As the problem is not getting the rabbi to talk, but getting the rabbi to stop talking.
I've heard that said for Christian pastors as well.
So Pastor Hughes, tell us who you are and why we're here.
My name is Wylie Hughes. I'm pastor of Orchard Park Presbyterian Church in Orchard Park, New York, suburb of Buffalo. And we are here to talk about a lot of things. But one of those things primarily is DEI and whether it is a viable option or is it a help or a hindrance? And so I am really excited to be here. And I remember hearing some of what was said about my particular call, my particular faith community, and my what I represent within that community. And it's very, very on point, on time. this discussion is very much on time because we'll talk about more, as we get into it. But yeah, this is going to be a great discussion, and it's good to see you, Miss Massey.
Pastor Hughes, how are you?
I'm doing well, doing well.
You've been getting my emails?
I have been getting your emails, but I've been out of town, so I have been not,
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
able to respond. But now I'm back, so
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Excellent. I am Rabbi Jonathan Freirich, former rabbi of Temple Beth Zion here in Western New York, former Allied Faith Engagement Coalition organizer, or call it just faith organizer for Voice Buffalo. And Pastor Hughes and I are committed to this idea that there is substance in us talking about issues that are challenging, that make us uncomfortable, that force us to consider things that we didn't know ahead of time. In other words, can we possibly come into a conversation not knowing where we're going to stand at the end of it? Will we be transformed by the encounter? Will we allow ourselves to face our discomfort and say, as opposed to coming in knowing all the answers from the outset? And in that, I'm honored and humbled to have Nanette here as our participant, our super participant who showed up, because Nanette is one of my primary teachers in this. I think in the world of dialogue between people from different backgrounds, it's really important for us to accept correction. And sometimes that correction comes from reading that happens in between meetings. Nanette doesn't remember, although I've mentioned to her before that when I first met Nanette, I did a classic white guy mistake. I offered her my resume, my curriculum vitae, my CV of all the ways in which I was not a racist. And so I mentioned work that I'd done, family members that are brown, all the whole thing. Here, trust me, I'm not a racist. And of course, one of the things that I learned both from Nanette and from one of her teachers, Robin DeAngelo, and from a lot of the other reading that I've done is, honestly, white people, stop that.
Yeah.
African Americans do not need to hear from us our history of why we're not racist. They need to see us as behaving in a way that is with them and listening to them and believing them. Pastor Scott Johnson, who is an African-American pastor here in Western New York, said to me that what he needs from white people, first, above all other things, is believing the testimony of what Black people go through. And with that in mind, Pastor Hughes and I found an article. Actually, it was sent to me by the leaders of the DEI committee of the League of Women Voters as something for them to talk about. And I passed it along to Pastor Hughes, and he said, "Oh, we should talk about this." And I put the link in the Facebook thread on this.
There wasn't any, if I'm not mistaken, there wasn't any information in that Facebook post about how to join this discussion today. So you might have some people. Did I miss it?
I reposted it, and this is our first adventure. So I just put the link in the chat in the Zoom chat. And we will continue with this. We're going to consider this our first go at this. So this is an article by Pastor Corey Brooks, who is a pastor in a church on the south side of Chicago, and he makes the statement that, first of all, systemic racism is in the DNA of America, and that he says the disconnect between the DEI ideology and the realities of his community is so deep that it's laughable. And he's responding to the sort of the challenges that Claudine Gay, as president of Harvard, faced, and saying, that she was the beneficiary of a DEI ideology, but that the DEI ideology doesn't help anybody except for people who are already privileged. And that it's not doing anything for his neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, that poverty and drugs and challenges that they face don't get changed at all by DEI. Now, this seems, from my perspective, a pretty controversial challenge to the norms of our society, where we have embraced the idea that somehow or another corporate usage, educational usage, governmental usage of the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or JEDI, or whatever we're going to call it, are going to make a difference for all of us. I believe Pastor Hughes has some opinions about this.
Let's see, make sure I'm not muted here. Yeah, I do have some opinions about it. When I first read the article, I was totally incensed. I was thinking, what is this guy thinking? What could he possibly be thinking as an African American man in Chicago doing the work that he's doing? How could he fix his mouth to say that DEI has failed the community? But the more I read it, I had to read the article many, many times, and I had to do a little research. And I'm starting to understand what he's actually talking about. And I think, at least for me in my journey, I had to go back and rethink some ideas that I had about DEI, so that I could sort of have well, I won't say unbiased, but as less biased as possible, that I could sort of look at it more objectively. But I'm still incensed. I'm still incensed, but I'm starting to understand where he is coming from. I think for me, I've always looked at DEI through the lens of its founding, through the lens of its foundational philosophy, right? And all of the studies that go with that. I've read the studies where, a diverse team, a diverse organization is a successful organization because of a diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of context. It allows an organization to function better, to be more adaptive to the changing world, to the changing environment around it. And so this, DEI programs, or at least the philosophy, is a good thing on paper. But I think what the author of the article is getting at is, while it might be great on paper, its execution falls short of its ideals. And the big evidence that he presents in the article is the fact that, DEI has been around for several decades, 50, 60 years, I think he says, and yet nothing has changed in its community. Which, I can't argue that. I can't argue that. And he goes into victim blaming and things of that nature, but we could talk more about that. But yeah, just personally, on a personal level, I am starting to see what he's talking about. I'm not completely convinced yet, but I'm starting to see it. And I'm interested and curious about what Ms. Massey has to say about it, because that's something that she and I haven't discussed yet.
I mean, that is exactly where I wanted to go next, because I was going to introduce Nanette as the person I would call the local expert on the teachings of Robin Angelo. There is no one I know who has read and know. I think, in fact, Robin DiAngelo might admit that Nanette Massey could cite her work better than Robin can. And so Robin DiAngelo's work is focused on that place in the work world where a person engages with the challenges of working with people from different backgrounds and what needs to be done in order to make that workplace function better. and among other things. And so, Nanette, this article, and I don't know if you've read it, and I just put it out there. So, I realize I'm putting you on the spot. So I understand that may be slightly unfair, but this question between what we share living in Buffalo, and Buffalo has a very productive Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo doing a racial equity roundtable that focuses on DEI hiring in the corporate world of Buffalo. And we have suffered a tragedy in a neighborhood not far from your home or mine on May 14th, 2022, when, again, an external person, a person not from Buffalo, came and massacred African Americans and targeted Buffalo because of the segregated nature of our city. That he could, from a distance, using publicly available data on the census, and if anybody's ever looked at the U.S. Census website, it's not easy to navigate, but it's not hard. Obviously, not hard enough for this young monster to find. To come in and scope out and scout out a supermarket, the only supermarket serving a majority African-American community, and come here and deliberately target and massacre and terrorize African-Americans in our community. So, Nanette, as our sort of local expert on this DEI sphere, what do you think about the disconnect between DEI and jobs for African Americans at upper echelons or even in middle echelons of our society, and its real or lack of real impact on Jefferson Avenue?
Well, you flatter me way too much, for one. And I want to clarify that I use what I do for the recording. I'm Nanette Massey in Buffalo, New York. You can find me at nanettetmassey.com. And what I do is I do workshops and presentations that are based on the work of Robin DiAngelo in her book, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. Now, how I came to be doing this is I did a workshop here in Buffalo at the Unitarian Church, where I talked to a largely white audience about race. And the presentation fell really flat, really flat. I found that what I found was that white people had come to this workshop to be pat on the back for being the good white people. And that wasn't what I brought. What I brought was, even if you consider yourselves the good white people, there's still work to be done. And people weren't trying to hear that. They just wanted to be pat on the back for being in the right place at the right time on this particular day. And somebody recommended Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, and I read her book. And what I do is I talk about what it is that I want to talk about, what I've always wanted to talk to white audiences about. But what I do is I couch it in the ideas in Robin DiAngelo's book, so that because her book was flying off the shelves, for crying. It was on the bestseller, the New York Times bestseller list for 3 years. And what I do is I talk about what I want to talk about, and then I reference an idea in Robin DiAngelo's book, so that I can say, okay, you accepted this, there it is. You accepted this idea just fine when it was coming from a white woman. Now that I'm telling you what it looks like, boots on the ground, don't run. You can't run now. When Robin DiAngelo put it in an academic terms, you accepted it. When I'm telling you what it looks like on the street, don't run now. And I do live on the east side of Buffalo, which is like 80-something% Black. And I volunteer at the grade school in my neighborhood. I volunteer with a second grade class. And this school has, I think, 800 something students in it, from kindergarten to 8th grade. And it's mostly Black. And it has a proficiency rating meaning kids reading and doing math at their grade level, has a proficiency rating of 20%. So that means that every 10 kids walk in, in a class of 12 people, the second grade class that I help tutor in, two of them are expected to read, write, and do math at their grade level. So what was the author's name of that piece that you talked about?
The DEI piece? His name is Pastor Corey Brooks.
So when Pastor Brooks talks about not seeing the efforts of DEI trickle down, looking around, I got to say I agree with him. And there's a because what happens is Black people who are the recipients of DEI efforts, they get taken out of this community. And Pastor George Nicholas, who lives over here too, he has children. He has some very accomplished sons, and he's Black. And he was telling me the other day that these programs for Black kids, the organizers are always trying to recruit him to get his kids in these programs, so that these programs can take credit for their later success. But he knows that his kids are doing all right now, and they're gonna do fine. His kids shouldn't be what he's saying is his kids shouldn't be the target of these programs. They need to go out here and talk to, like I said, my second grade class that I tutor in. I got one kid in there who I had to teach him to count from 1 to 100. And yeah, it's the efforts, the DEI efforts are all about getting, Black people up in high profile places, so that these places, companies, organizations, can show the world we're doing it right. We're doing the DEI thing right. And then one more thing, and I'm going to shut up. My Black elders have told me that in the 60s and 70s, when affirmative action was new and there was a big push for it, what happened was a lot of organizations hired 1 or 2 Black people, put their desk in the front window where everybody could see them. And then those Black people, it was made clear to those Black people that if they wanted to keep their positions, they would keep quiet and not bring any more Black people in here. Mm-hmm. Because that wasn't what the company wanted. They just wanted window dressing, and they wanted to get the public off of their back. But they didn't actually want more Black people. So
DEI is the accusation here is that DEI is tokenism dressed up.
I wouldn't say that. There's a foundation here in Buffalo called the Oshai Foundation. They are just oodles of money, and what they do is they give money to organizations and projects, and they have decided that they want to take on the east side of Buffalo. Like I said, the east side is some 80-something% Black. They've decided that they want to really take on making an improvement to the east side of Buffalo. And I called them up and I said, I want to meet with you guys, because that's exact what we're talking about today is exactly what I want to talk to them about. Don't just go cherry picking the Black people who are already going to be okay and the programs for them. We've got second graders who can't count to 100. And if you want to make real change, y'all are gonna have to get down and dirty and in the mud, with the people who are challenging to help advance.
So, Pastor Hughes, you have something to say? It looks like you have something to say.
No, I'm just bobbing my head because I agree. I think you asked the question, is DEI tokenism a form of tokenism? And I see why one would come to that conclusion, but I think it's a little bit deeper than that. I think it's a bit more insidious than that. Corey Brooks in the article says it very succinctly. He says that the reality is that DEI is an ideology for the privileged. It helps people like Claudine Gay who exploit race for power and prestige, and it hurts communities like mine by exploiting them for poverty porn, which I thought was very, 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 very graphic analogy, but it's true. And I think, you know, Ms. Massey mentioned that a lot of these initiatives that are introduced in our community, it takes the talent out of our community and then puts the camera back into the community to say how horrible the community is. And then to say, well, look at what we have done. We've taken you out of your community. We've given you a better life. And I say that in quotation marks. But then what happens to the community, right? The community suffers. And so I'm starting to see, again, like I said, my understanding is shifting. It's shifting because I'm starting to see that. And I didn't even know that DEI was around as long as it's been around, because it has never impacted my community at all. Right? I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia. We've
Oh,
never,
snap.
I
I
mean, I
didn't
didn't
know
hear,
that. I didn't know
yeah, I'm
that.
from
I lived in
Catskill
Atlanta
North.
for 25 years before I came back here.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's my community, and we've never benefited from DEI. I mean, um, and he says another thing in the article, that he talks about the African American community suffering from one liberal agenda to the next since the 60s. So he's sort of lumping DEI in with all of the other so-called initiatives that purported to help the community but has not. Um, and so it's a little bit deeper than tokenism. You know what I mean?
So,
Let me add this. Let me add this. DEI is a broad thing. It's like saying, okay, let's talk about democracy. And let's say, let's talk about whether or not democracy has worked. You got 400 different people. They'll have 400 different ideas of democracy. So DEI is a great big, it's a great big blanket. And to say that it produces tokenism, I don't want to say that either, because for one, the top public school here in Buffalo is City Honors, and that school was invented as a DEI initiative. It was meant as a place for city, not just Black people, but city people who couldn't afford to send their kids to private school, for them to get an excellent education. The other thing that I want to mention is I have a friend named Sylvester Monroe. Sylvester was a part of a program called A Better Chance, I believe it's called. And he grew up in the South Side of Chicago, single mom, the whole shebang. And this program, A Better Chance, in like 60 or 70 something, plucked him out of the South Side of Chicago and sent him to one of those fancy schmancy boarding schools like Groton or something like that. He did excellent there, and he went there from there to Harvard. He finished Harvard, and he was the He was the lead editor at Essence Magazine. He was an editor at the Washington Post. He was an editor at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which is where I met him. He worked for Newsweek on the O.J. Simpson story. I believe he worked for Time too. So he would, and the opportunity that came along for him, he wasn't a guy who was going to rise to the top without this opportunity. So I don't want to dump on affirmative action or DEI. I don't want to dump on these efforts. They certainly have their place.
So maybe we could take a yes and approach to this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, the answer to our difficulties as an American society, broadly, not just in majority minority communities like Maston and Cold Spring and the other neighborhoods of the east side of Buffalo, but broadly throughout, is maybe identified in this idea that college is not the answer. Mm. Now, college was the answer for Sylvester Monroe, right? Mm-hmm. So, and there are a lot of people. College was the answer for Barack Obama. And however, we have a program on the East Side, for example, called Say Yes, which tries to make college the answer for everybody. Yeah. The fact of the matter is that our society does not need everybody to be college educated. We need people who do a lot of things. We need people
who can fix cars.
Well,
yeah, have a vocation. How about that? Yeah.
Let's talk about fixing cars. That's actually, Nanette, a super. So I spoke with an attorney here in town who talked about the cost to our police force of replacing vehicles, and one of the reasons why Buffalo police spend so much on vehicles is because they do not maintain them, because they do not have enough budget to hire mechanics. And there are not enough mechanics to be hired. There are not enough mechanics to be hired for our snowplows here in Buffalo, which is why in last December's storm, County Executive Mark Poloncarz has photos of Buffalo city plows sitting unused, snowed in, because they are not maintained.
Yep.
And we don't have an educational system designed to help people find their way into jobs, into expertise that gets them jobs. We have an educational system that is one size fits all, trying to get people to college. Mm-hmm. I also went to a specialized public school, a magnet school in New York City called Stuyvesant High School. I graduated in a class of 800 in 1988 that was, 30% Jewish, 35% South Asian, and with a mix of the rest of, New York's minorities and a small white population thrown in. Mm. The graduating class as of last year had six total, not 6%, 6 individuals who were African-American. Mm-hmm.
Same thing's happening at city honors, yeah.
But 90% of the graduating class of Stuyvesant High School at this point seems to be Southeast Asian, that it is an entirely Asian population. Mm-hmm. And so we are not doing this well for everybody. We are doing this well for somebody's.
Well, and that sort of echoes what Corey Brooks is saying, is that, but I think that stems from this idea that DEI is the silver bullet that's going to solve our problems. And I saw the same thing happen when Barack Obama was president. There was so many people, it was African Americans, white people, American people, that were so disappointed that Barack Obama didn't do this and do that. And I was trying to get people to understand that it's not a one size fit all, even for the president of the United States. You can't expect one person, one individual, one cabinet, one administration to solve all of the problems. However, if we could all work together, because it is a multifaceted problem that requires a multifaceted solution. I think that DEI could be a part of that solution, but it is not the entirety of that solution. I think, and I mentioned earlier that DEI never really impacted my community. I stand corrected because I too was in a magnet program, right? And my magnet program, I was bused to North Atlanta on the other side of town, where
Mhm.
North Atlanta had a performing arts magnet and an international baccalaureate magnet. And because I wanted to do both, they allowed me to do both. I would not have gotten that education if I went to the school down the street, which was Mays High. I didn't want to go to Mays High. So I was glad when I was in the magnet program. But again, it took me out of the community. And so, yes, I have been impacted by it, but I'm the only one. I was the only Black kid in my block that got into the magnet program. There were people in my neighborhood who were much better than me in many areas, and yet they chose me. I like to
Mhm.
think that they chose me. So it didn't help my community at all, and it didn't help me either because I was never educated. I never learned how to come back and to replenish my community. It was never taught to me, right? So here I am. I'm in my mid 40s, and now I'm trying to learn how to give back to my community because I've been snatched away from it. So there,
Mhm.
you know, we have to take that into consideration.
Mhm. You said you mentioned the Southeast Asian population being the biggest at this magnet school, and um, the organization that brought the group of people that brought uh, this the affirmative action case to Harvard, and got rid of affirmative action in college entrance discussions. It's been said that because it was a white guy who recruited some Asians and said, "Hey, I think you guys have a case here," but which was true. But really, he did it for white people. And and the funny thing is, I heard somebody say all he did was make it. All he did was make it so that the future of Ivy League population is going to be Asians. Because
Well,
the Asians are beating white butts too.
maybe, but there aren't enough. The numbers game doesn't work in favor in the long run. I think the key here, though, is not all the things that don't work, because we can pick those apart. But what does work? You know, Ginny, my much smarter roommate than I am, said that, can you find something that would be more effective in terms of immediate outcomes for American society than just having more African American medical doctors?
Mm.
That just having more African American MDs. Look at our numbers in terms of infant mortality for African American mothers, and understand the incredible differential in outcome when African Americans are treated by African American doctors, because God only knows what we've done in this medical system is so racist historically, so systemically racist, so systemically bad for African Americans, right? We wouldn't have the field of gynecology without horrendous racist experimenting without anesthesia on African American women in the 1800s. It was just
Mhm.
awful. So the entirety of medicine, there's a very good reason why African Americans do not trust the medical establishment, do not trust going into doctors, do not trust, so that even in our most advanced fields, like here at UB, they're talking about genetically tailored medicine, which
Mhm.
requires a genetic database. But the genetic database for African Americans is so small because African Americans understandably do not want to give their genetic data up to anyone in the medical establishment. So one of the ideas was, we need to partner with churches in majority minority communities and have clinics put in the churches so that the pastor can say, I trust these medical professionals, and we could provide actually important close on care for communities that don't have it otherwise. And at the same time, people could be asked to volunteer their genetic data when they get necessary treatment. So what would work? How do we get people to be educated to be and electricians and construction workers and mechanics, instead of saying college is the solution, which is the DEI solution, a good one for some people? How do we get resources to get medical care for those who need it? Because right now, as we've talked about before, if I were to change my address from one side of Main Street to the other side of Main Street, where I live in North Buffalo, if I were to go from my address in North Buffalo to closer to Bennett High School, me as a man, I would lose 10 to 15 years of life expectancy, merely on health outcomes, having nothing to do with violence or crime or anything, just on health outcomes.
I have a response, and I'm going to try to keep it short. I love that idea about doctors having medical personnel right in a church. That is an amazing idea. And I would add to that, I am a big believer that real change happens on the micro level and expresses on the macro level in time. In the 50s and early 60s, when the civil rights movement was happening, it didn't have its big change until white people saw Black people on TV getting hosed down, by fire departments just for marching in the street and wanting to vote. That's when it got real. When people were like, "Oh snap! That looks like Joe across the street from me," or sympathetic Southerners sympathetic white Southerners who didn't want to get involved, when they saw people they knew, people's kids they knew, getting squirted down with hoses and beat with clubs. That's when things changed. When white people on a micro level began to take this whole idea of civil rights and apply it on a macro level to people that they knew and cared about. That's when things changed, and that's when the executive branch and the legislative branches, that's when they finally had the numbers that they needed in order to make the changes for them, in order to make the changes that they did, such as the Voting Rights Act and so on and so forth. So what that looks like for me is volunteering at this school in my neighborhood, and I work with this one girl, and she's really ahead of, she's really ahead of her time. And I beat it in her head she's in third grade. I've been beating it in her head since second grade. You are going to City Honors. You are going to City Honors. You are going to City Honors. And I went and I bought her a City Honors book bag, and I gave it to her. And like I said, I have the patience to sit with a kid who doesn't know how to count from 1 to 100. And I feel like this is where real change is going to happen, is individuals caring about the people in their immediate sphere enough to partner with them and improve their life and their well-being and their situation, until we have critical mass. And I might be naive, but that's my belief.
Well, I wouldn't say you're naive, but I there's a big challenge there, and I take this opportunity to bring up my own context, because Orchard Park is a bubble, and it is a reinforced bubble. And
I'm trying to get down
um,
there. I'm trying to get down
I
there,
know,
Pastor
I
Hughes.
know, I know, I know, but it's a hard nut to crack because they
Mhm.
just don't see the relevance, and
They
that's
do.
been the thorn in my side. It's like I could bring yourself down there, I could bring a lot of people down there that I meet, but what they don't see the relevance of it, and so I have to
Mhm.
convince these people to see why it matters because they're in this bubble. Because like you said, I agree with you 100%. If they knew, if they saw with their own eyes, then they would understand the necessity of it. But because they aren't even willing to do that, right? It is hard for me to advocate for young kids. It's hard for me to do that. I mean, my daughter's 7 years old. She's brilliant. Of course, I'm her parent, so I'm going to say she's the smartest kid in the world. But at the
We'll
same
allow you
time,
that.
yeah, I'm
Oh,
biased,
come
right?
on. She identified as the appropriate music for a bunny hip hop. So we
Yeah,
are.
she did. I mean, just I didn't teach her that, right? So I I'm biased, but at the same time, it bothers me when my daughter goes to church, my church that I'm the pastor of, and people are always amazed at how good she reads. They're always amazed at how she's so articulate. They're always amazed at how my children talk so well, and I can't help but feel like, what did you expect? You expect my children to be deaf mute? Like, what's the problem here? I have a PhD. My wife has a PhD. What do you think? That my children are going to be idiots like the
So,
two of you think?
Pastor, I hate to interrupt you, but I'm going to because I'm a rabbi and Jewish. Uh, so I want to offer you my experience with my children among Jewish adults is the same.
Oh yeah.
Mm,
So, white people overwhelmingly, these are Jews of European descent. And one of my favorite events all year is we have Jewish friends who host a reading of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th.
hmm
And we've been here long enough in Buffalo to have my son, who now is driving, show up to that as an 8-year-old, and my daughter, who is now 10, also show up as like a 9-year-old. So we've gone
hmm
the distance with them, and both of them had no problem when they were in second or third or fourth grade reading a paragraph of the Declaration of Independence to the great amazement of a bunch of white Jewish people, all of whom are educated. And I would
hmm
say what I just said to Sadie, our 10-year-old today, that comparing her resources at home uh, to her peers when it comes to, finding poetry, for example, because she just recently selected 25 poems for a poetry project, not from, Shel Silverstein, but from the Norton Anthology of Poetry that Ginny used for poetry in college, right?
Right.
So our kids are not normal in any setting. So I
Yeah.
want to say, yes,
Rabbi, I have to interrupt you. Rabbi, I
go
have to
for it.
interrupt you because you feel me, Pastor Hughes?
I
Okay.
feel you. I feel you.
Okay. So this is sounding like I totally understand because my son's nephew's roommate's college buddy was Black too. So I totally understand. That's what this is sounding like.
I hope
A
it's not what I'm saying, but that's
okay.
okay.
and and B, um, the point of what Pastor Hughes was really saying, though, um, was that people so underestimate Black people
That's it.
that and it's different to say, okay, you're white and you've got two pretty precocious kids. That's different.
Yeah.
What these people are saying, we're so surprised your child being Black, your children being Black, that they read so well, that they do this, that they do that. And that's what we live with. People
Mm.
constantly I heard somebody say the racism of lack of expectation. I'm not saying that well,
Mhm.
Mediocrity.
But yeah, the racism of lowered expectations. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
I understand.
that's what we're really talking about here.
Yeah. I mean, could I be honest? They didn't expect me to be as smart as I am, and that
Yeah.
was actually said by one of the committee members who was actually actively searching for a pastor when they interviewed me. He, and again, to his credit, he wasn't trying to be mean. He wasn't trying to be derogatory. He was being very honest. He said, I'm just impressed by your level of intellect. And I'm on a Zoom screen, so he can't he can't see my body language. But I'm like, you mean well. You mean well. And I asked him, I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, it's just that you're so well read and you're so this and you're so that. And I said, um, again, what do you mean by that? What does it mean for you to say you're so well read? Are you well read? He was a retired veterinarian, so you are very well read. We expect that from you. But I am a pastor. Would you not expect your pastor to be well read? Like it, and so he
Both.
realized, oh, I see. And I said, yeah, I didn't hold it against him, but I wanted him to be aware that that is exactly how it sounded. Like he didn't expect me to be
Mhm.
so educated with all the degrees and all the languages I speak. I'm like, but I'm a pastor. And the criterion for Presbyterian pastors is to go to seminary and learn Koine Greek and biblical Hebrew. So of course I speak multiple languages. It's part of the education. And if I were a white pastor, would you have said that? Would you have said, I'm just surprised at how many languages you speak? And that
Mhm.
sort of shut the conversation down. I didn't mean to shut it down, but I had to say that because I said this cannot be why you brought. Please don't tell me I'm a DEI hire. I just don't tell me that, because if you say
Well,
that,
so
then I'm out the door, right?
so I introduced you, Pastor Hughes, as
Rabbi, may I? And I promise I'll shut up because I want to bring it back to, because I just thought of something that brings it all the way back to what we're
please.
originally talking about. Um, um, uh, the well, like I said, the school in my neighborhood has a 20% proficiency rating, um, and just nobody expects any more of these kids. Nobody
Right.
expects any more of these Black kids, of these city kids, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, the racism of lowered expectations. And
Yeah.
we're talking about, do the DEI and anti-racism efforts put forth, do they trickle all the way down to these people? The racism of lowered expectations has all of us in this city saying, well, that's just how these kids are,
Yeah.
instead of,
Yeah.
my goodness, we are putting 80% of this school out to the job market unable to read, and that is just not acceptable. What are
Not
we going to
acceptable.
do now?
Right.
Well,
That
and
brings it all the way back to what we were talking about.
I was
Exactly.
gonna so I was gonna ask you, Pastor Hughes, about the question of whether or not you're a DEI hire. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because you have said to me when we first met that Orchard Park Presbyterian went out deliberately to hire an African
Mm-hmm.
American minister.
Mm-hmm.
And subsequently, uh, and this is feel like they deserve credit for, having done so.
We're
Yeah.
done. Black pastor, we're
Oh,
done.
that's totally the attitude. That is totally the attitude. I'll give you an example. Hopefully, it doesn't take up too much time. Um, we're Presbyterian Church in the USA, and as a denomination, PCUSA, the denomination launched this initiative called the Matthew 25 Initiative, and it's based on the passage in Matthew 25 where Christ is likening the kingdom to when people come to the king, and the king says, "You people who helped me, you fed me when I was hungry. You gave me clothes when I was naked. You gave me water when I was thirsty. You can enter the kingdom." And they say, "Well, God, when King, when did we feed you? When did we clothe you?" And the king says, "Whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me." Right. So that's the Matthew 25 passage. And so the initiative was created. It was created with that passage in mind to talk about how faith communities can engage in that ideology within the ministry. And so churches can opt in to be a Matthew 25 church. And then they broke the initiative down into three areas of focus. One area is eradicating systemic racism, addressing and eradicating poverty, and revitalizing our worshiping community. These are the three focuses, both sides. And I bring this idea to the church, to the leaders of the church, and I said, this is something that I think we should consider. And so I took my time and I broke it down. I had Bible studies. We're talking about for maybe 2 or 3 months. I worked with my leaders and I sort of introduced this idea, this concept, and we worked through the passages and we really talked about it at length, in depth. And I'm revealing it to more and more people, and we're getting people involved. And so finally, we make a decision as a leadership team to say, okay, we want to be a Matthew 25 church. And I'm happy. I'm excited because this really does open us up to new ways of doing ministry. And the first thing that they say to me is, well, we have to market this thing because we have a lot of members and they need to know and understand what this means. So why don't we put together this little packet that explains the Matthew 25 initiative and just tell them that we've been doing this all along? And I had to pause. I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, we do this. We've been making sandwiches. We have Sandwich Sunday that we make sandwiches and we feed the hungry. We have the Super Bowl caring thing where we collect canned goods and we do this. And we give grants to grassroots organizations who need grant money. And so we're doing all of this." And they had, they had all these pictures of what they're feeding the homeless, and they have all of it. And it got away from me because literally they put together this beautiful, and I mean, I have it around there somewhere. I keep it in my cork board because it got away from me. They totally missed the whole thing about what it means to do the things that Jesus was saying. Like, you have to be there, and it goes back to the DEI situation with Corey Brooks. Is that it's the DEI initiative as in practice, it cherry picks, it reaches into a community and pull you out of your community, but it doesn't help the community. And so this is exactly what they're doing. They reach in, they feed who they want to feed, they help who they want to help, as long as it benefits the church. And you have to meet a certain criteria in order to get the grant money, and that's what they stand on. And like you said, pat on the back, and they're done. And so when I, as a pastor who has been called to preach truth to power, when I call them out on this, they get offended. They get really offended. Pastor, how could you
But that's
say
what
this
they
about
brought you for, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, but because that's why I'm here. I'm here to speak truth to power. And this is what I'm seeing. You guys are patting yourself on the back as if you've solved all the problems, and you haven't. You're not even addressing the problems. You're acknowledging that they exist, but you're not focusing on how to eradicate anything, because you feel like as long as you have a black pastor and as long as you're feeding a few people every week, then you've done your job. And I'm telling you that you haven't. And so it's disconcerting sometimes because you try. I'm doing the best I can here, and it always seems to sort of shift back to what they've already done. And it is a microcosm of our great nation, because that is exactly what America has done since Emancipation Proclamation, is to say, look, we have this great piece of policy that sets the slaves free, so we're good, right? And then they come up with the 13th Amendment, and all of a sudden black lives are criminalized, and now you have scores of black people who are back in slavery, right? Then they come out with the Voting Rights Act in 1964, and they say, hey, we're good, right? And that was the end of the civil rights movement, and yet you have all of these issues. Then they come up with affirmative action. Hey, we're good, right? And so it's this thing where America thinks that just because we have these initiatives and on paper they're great, they don't always pan out in practice. But then America pats itself on the back and say we are in a post-racial society because we've elected an African American president. So You don't have to worry about it anymore. Racism is dead. It's all good. We're all equal. We're all on a level playing field. So let's get on with our lives. And that's the shortcoming, I think.
Well, so here's the deal. We are all works in progress.
Yes.
We come here today, hopefully, all of us transformed by our encounter, by virtue of being uncomfortable and learning, and learning requires a certain degree of discomfort, and doing what both of you are advocating, which is number one, Nanette, you are doing triage on your community. You are saying there are children who are threatened, and I am going to do my best to help those children who are threatened to advance, to be less threatened. And then we've got Pastor Hughes, who's trying to get a church to do the same thing, to actually do immediate needs. However, I would say that, Reverend Denise Walden Glenn likes to use the image of there are babies that are drowning in the river, and we got to pull them out. Right. So the two of you have talked about pulling those babies out, but at the same time, we have to go upriver and stop putting babies in harm's way.
The river, yeah.
And to a certain extent, Pastor Hughes, I think our challenge is really, how do we get the people at Orchard Park Presbyterian to work on systems change to support people like Nanette doing triage in the trenches? And maybe one of the things that we need to do is we need to bring Orchard Park Presbyterian to do a service in Maston. And instead of asking,
No. Because they would come up here like, poor us, we need help.
It's poverty porn once again.
Yeah, poverty porn. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to have to end, but I want to make to be continued on a lot of this, because number one, Pastor Hughes, you and I are committed to doing this, every other week? We're going to do this in 2 weeks?
Yeah, sure. That's great.
Okay. So Wednesday, February 28th, noon, on Facebook and on Zoom, we will be here. We will work out some details. Nanette, of course, we want you to come back. Catherine Schweitzer, who has been our lone person not speaking, thank you so much for being here. And so we want to do that. So in 2 weeks, we will be back. And this is really our question. How do we get white people to effectively become accomplices in systems change? And
accomplices instead of allies. Don't need allies.
No, to not participate in poverty porn, to not pat ourselves on the back for, yes, I'm good enough. No, there is no good enough. The process of a better society, there is no goal line. There is only continuing to do the work. There is no point at which the 14th Amendment was enough, especially when we look at the history of the 14th Amendment then being used for corporate rights, not personal rights. There is no history of the Voting Rights Act being enough, because we now look at a Supreme Court that has dismantled the Voting Rights Act. So there is no goal line. There is only continuing to do the work. And so I am advocating among some people to look at the east side of Buffalo, not just as a series of neighborhoods, but like a developing country. How do we start building a better infrastructure from the ground up for the east side of Buffalo? How do we replace?
I want to encourage white people to see the east side of Buffalo as your brothers and sisters. Literally.
Amen.
Thank you.
That's what.
Thank you.
I would even go beyond the developing country thing. We need white Buffalo to see us as a part of them.
Yeah.
If I got cancer in my toe, my liver isn't going, woo, dodged a bullet there. If I got cancer, if there's cancer in my body, I have cancer.
That's right.
Nanette, thank you for that corrective. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So the other thing, so
And
we have a couple
Buffalo-
of,
I'll finish, I promise. And Buffalo needs to see the east side of Buffalo as a part of itself that
Yes.
is not functioning as it should. And there are
Yes.
plenty of ways that it could be.
so we've got a bunch of other topics to tackle in addition to this one. But I think at the heart of this, one of this is accompliship. How do we do that? How do we work on both immediate needs and systems change? Isabel Wilkerson's amazing book Cast was recently made into an amazing movie. I wonder if we want to schedule a time for us to, or say, everybody go and see it and we'll come and talk about it at some future date. So we will accept suggestions for what we want to talk about. Obviously, Pastor Hughes is, not just good enough but actually exceptional on every level. I urge all of you to Google all the things that he's done. He speaks Arabic fluently. So,
not so fluently, but I still speak it.
As a relatively overeducated Jewish white guy, I am in awe of Pastor Hughes, not because he is exceptional for somebody of a particular background, but because he's exceptional, period. So, and the same can be said about Nanette. Both of you are amazing people, and I am honored to share this time with you. I promise everybody we will do a better job promoting and getting links out for next time. This will go up on both Pastor Hughes and my YouTube channels, I imagine, pretty soon because I recorded. And thank you again, Nanette DMassey.com.
Yeah.
NanetteDMassey.com.
I spelled my own name wrong. Oh my
That's
God.
okay. NanetteDMassey.com, Orchard Park Presbyterian Church. Find us on Facebook. Find us on Pastor Hughes is very active on Instagram and on TikTok. So we are available. Come to us, ask us questions, keep the dialogue going. And thank you to the person who really does not like Ibram Kendi's work on our
yes, that guy.
On our Getting Real About Anti-Racism Facebook page. I really appreciate your perspective.
I wish he were here, man. God, I wish he would show up.
To be continued. Thank you both.
Yes.
And I am going to do